This video is going to serve as a part 2 to the sparring combos that you can practice on a bag. These are just simple kicking techniques that you can practice without a partner just to drill the agility and the muscle memory of them. If you haven't seen part 1, I'm going to link it in the description below, but we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So this first technique isn't actually a combo, but it can have a fake or a first kick thrown as a decoy. It's what is known as a tornado kick, which is just a roundhouse kick thrown from a spinning and a jumping position. So for the basis of this kick, we're actually going to use the front leg to kick, but not just a forward kick. We're going to use our back leg to initiate the motion by turning with it and then jumping into the kick with the opposite leg. So this obviously isn't as fast as throwing just a simple forward roundhouse kick because of the turning and jumping that you have to do. But you'd be surprised if you work hard enough, you can be almost as quick with the turning and jumping motion with a tornado kick. But the point is just to have something more than just the basic roundhouse kick in your arsenal, just a way to mix it up. And sometimes you can just throw this in a sparring match, not trying to land it, but just trying to throw your opponent off and coax them into other techniques. So what's important when you do this is that you're not lifting your back foot, but more so you're throwing it in a circle. So I want to create the momentum with it instead of having to lift it and drag it with me to perform the kick. You can even practice this motion without the kick by just throwing your back foot and trying to land forward with it. Once you're comfortable with that, you're just performing that motion by throwing that back leg and practicing enough times to know where your distance needs to be and then where your timing needs to be, where you should jump. Because if you're trying to jump too early, you have to really spin too much and you're not going to get a good kick from that. But that's what bag work is for, to practice repetition after repetition and fine-tune your techniques to have them ready for when you're sparring with someone else. This technique can also be applied when you are offline of your opponent. When you're circling with each other and they're not in front of me with my hips aligned with them anymore. I'll simulate that by moving here. Say we both started in this line and my opponent's starting to circle around me. I can kind of close that and correct that motion with my tornado kick. I just have to adjust it a little bit and not go forward as much as I'm going diagonal. So the key with that is focusing on the back leg, aiming, pointing the knee to where my target is. So I'm just going to jump a little earlier, just trying to recover that distance that the opponent is starting to create. Do be careful with this because now when I'm offline, my foot's going to come more to the front of the target, and if I'm doing a face level kick, I would be hitting in the face, and in some styles, in some rule systems, that's not allowed. But if you're hitting body level to the stomach, it doesn't matter if you're hitting to the front or the sides in that situation. Yeah. So like I said before, this doesn't just have to be the close turning spinning technique. You can start from more of a distance, and you can actually use the back leg to kick by throwing the first leg, either just lifting it as a check or actually performing that first kick, knowing you're not going to land it, just to try to close distance, and then turning and finishing with that tornado kick. So this next technique is also not really a combo because the first technique is just really a check kick, but those are just as important in combinations as regular kicks are to conserve energy as well as mix up the types of techniques that you're doing. But all we're doing is faking like we're turning into a hook kick or just a turn back kick, but reversing that turn into a regular back kick. So I'm facing my opponent, I'm going to turn with my back foot as if I'm going to lift it, but I just take a quick step in and then turn back with the first leg that I had in front to perform that back kick. This technique is as basic as it gets, but you'd be surprised at how effective it is at scoring points in a sparring match. So again, all I'm doing is turning my back. You can even turn your head quickly as more indication that I'm going in that direction, but just be careful because if you have an experienced opponent, as soon as you turn your back, you're opening up at least the back of your head if they can score points to that. And depending on what art you practice, you might get kicked in the back or hit in the back, and that can be a point as well. But just be as quick as possible while still indicating to some degree what I'm faking into doing with just a quick step to draw your opponent's attention to that first technique, and then turn it around into a quick back kick to the ribs or to the stomach. This is similar logic to doing just a switch kick. All you're doing is making a motion to try to get your opponent's attention and then trying to take advantage of that by throwing a second technique. So all I'm doing is pretending and sliding in. Yeah. Yeah. Next technique is going to be a front push kick, following up with a roundhouse kick. Again, like I said, these are basic techniques. These are just supposed to give you some ideas that you can practice and then create your own combos from them. So this one might not be the most ideal practice with a bag, because a bag is not going to act the same way that a person does. Sometimes a person is going to do the same thing this does, so it can help you in that regard, but not in all circumstances. What I mean by that is when you throw a push kick, the idea is to create distance. You know, if you're too close to someone, you just want to get your foot up near their hip or their stomach area and just push them back. The bag's not really going to do that. It's not going to slide like a person does. But sometimes they're firm where they are, and sometimes you're the one that creates that distance by stepping back. So we're going to practice that circumstance. So I'm just getting the tip of the ball of my foot and the toes into a point of the target and extending my knee to create a push, and the bag is only going to slide back and forth. So I'm going to create the distance that I want to have by moving my body back, and then now I have where I want, and I'm just going to throw a roundhouse kick with the same foot, trying to basically drop my foot and bounce it. In the forward application, what happens is you're going to throw the foot and then you're just advancing. Again, the same thing happens with the toes. You're dropping and bouncing into the technique. So again, you can imagine like you're too close to your opponent, so get a foot in and just create distance. And then you're trying to do this quickly, because most cases, if somebody's experienced, they're going to be able to block this second kick easily, but it is just some form of action to help you maybe initiate something else. Yeah. This technique is one of my favorites. It's just a spinning hook kick followed by a roundhouse kick with the same foot. We've normally been practicing like the second technique, or even the third technique is the one that we're actually trying to land, and the first one is thrown as a decoy. That can be the case in this technique, but this one you can have a higher success rate with landing the first technique if you're quick enough and if you practice enough with just that technique. You're just kind of doing a little hop and chambering that back foot like you're doing a jump turn back kick, extending it just in front of the target and then following it through afterwards. You definitely don't want to just lift your foot and swing it into the target, because one, that's going to telegraph the technique. Their peripheral vision is going to be able to see that leg coming from way before you kick and be able to block it easier. It's going to take longer to get there, and it's not going to be as strong. So you can kind of go off on a tangent and practice just this turn back hook kick technique, but we're going to keep it a little simple and focus on just this combo and not go too much detail on the technique itself. So again, you're throwing that first technique and just letting it fly past. If you want to practice a little bit more detailed and a little bit more precise, you can figure out where your distance needs to be to where you can kind of swipe past the front of the target with your foot and then follow up with the second technique. But either way, you're just jumping and throwing that hook kick and then trying to keep your hips open chambered to follow up in case that kick doesn't land into a roundhouse kick with the same foot. So you want to kind of land with your foot naturally wherever it goes. You don't want to pull it all the way back, and then you have to cover all that distance again. You just want to land kind of next to or beside yourself to the target and then pop your hip right into it. But it's important how you land, making your foot not, turn my hips back where they were, because then I'm going to have to take more time and energy to get back to where I was already there and ready to throw that technique at a quicker rate. But also give yourself a few times of just hitting the target itself and landing that first technique. It's going to prevent you from being able to finish through and perform the second one, but train your body to recognize each of those circumstances. And last but not least, this is another simple technique, but you do see it happen quite often if you do watch professional Taekwondo sparring, and that's finishing with crescent kicks. Remember, this is point sparring, so it's not always the most practical of results. You're not trying to, incapacitate somebody all the time. You're just trying to tap with enough force. There's a lot of kicks that aren't built for power, but more for speed and just contact, where you can be awarded a point. This is one of those situations. This kind of happens when you are, again, really close to somebody. This is not what you would do in a self-defense situation. This is a strictly more sport result. You're just trying to lift your outer leg to try to reach up and hit enough of the headgear again to score a point. So again, for this combo, we're going to start with just a check kick, where you're just lifting your knee as if you're going to perform any kick from that scenario. And a lot of times what happens is somebody's going to advance when you're off of one foot, because that's a really good time to score a point on me if I'm the opponent. So again, I'm throwing my foot here, and then I'm just trying to close distance this time, not create distance. And then once I'm in, if this is traditional to the point where it's only kicks are allowed, then my hands just kind of get inside of my opponent. I'm not going to score points with them, and I can use them to brace and lift my foot into the technique. So I find it easier to check with one foot and then crescent kick with the other foot. It kind of sets me up to do that, or vice versa, where I'm just lifting and then popping the kick out of that. Now obviously you always have to think of, with all these techniques, that the opponent is not just going to stand there, and when I throw a check kick, they might be moving in to attack me, and I definitely wouldn't be able to throw this technique in there. But this can just happen in a scenario where somebody's moving in to do something. I'm kind of closing in the other half of that distance before they can get, lift their foot into like a side kick or a roundhouse kick to try to attack me back. So the advantage that these crescent kicks provide in a point sparring setting is, like I said, when you're in close distance, you'd have to be really flexible to turn your hip and do a proper roundhouse kick to lift your foot high enough to be close to you and hit the head at the same time. Because with a crescent kick, you don't have to turn your hips. It's all just in lifting the foot, and all of us are more flexible in this motion than we are with turning the hip and trying to lift it straight up like that. And it can be faster because, again, we're not going through the time of twisting our hips into a proper kicking motion. In real life situations, you want to be stronger with your kicks if you're trying to incapacitate someone, but in a sport setting where all you're just doing is trying to make contact and you're actually not trying to hurt somebody, you're just trying to score a point, this is something that's more applicable. So there are 5 more sparring combos for you to practice on your own and to generate your own ideas from. Some of these kind of resemble some of the ones I did in my first video, and that's okay. They don't have to be on different ends of the spectrum. They can just be small changes to combos that you're already comfortable with, and those can make big differences. Sparring is a mind game, so it is important to have diverse attacks in your brain already, but you don't want to try to spend too much time doing a new technique every day, because you want to spend time on your go-to techniques and you want to be able to drill those the most, because you want to be able to rely on something when the situation calls for it. So find your own balance, but most importantly, find a partner or get a bag and just practice and practice, and that's where your results are going to come from. If you enjoy videos like this, or there's something else that you would be more interested in seeing, let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and keep training.